Welcome to the Hard But Worth It podcast, where we explore the leader's journey. I'm Kirk.
I'm Mitch.
And on this episode, we're going to ask a question like, can you trust your team too much?
Too much.
And how much would too much be if you could? And what does this word trust even mean?
Yeah, so we're going to open Pandora's box around this thing, right? Because the word trust, I mean, it's a word that has so much nuance and meaning tied to it, similar to like a word we might use love in the English language. But like, I love pizza and I love my wife. And yet we know when we say those two things, they mean complete different things.
We hope we know
hope
that.
Yeah. Exactly. And so when we have this word trust, I think one of the first things we have to recognize is everyone has a different version. In fact, we have different versions of the meaning of trust, maybe based on context, based on the situation. So trust is kind of complicated to assume when we use the word trust, we're all thinking the same thing.
Right.
Or we all mean the same thing. So we have to kind of figure first out what's our point of reference, right?
I also think, like the word love, we use this word a lot to mean all these different things, but it seems as though people know what they're talking about when they talk about love. It sounds like they do.
Yeah.
We all seem to agree that we know what we're talking about, right? Trust is like that. And I hear people use this word trust in this concrete but shallow way, right? It's like building a foundation that's only 2 inches thick. It looks concrete. It is concrete, but it can't bear much weight.
Right.
And so, like you say, this conversation is going to go down into this messy land of language.
Yeah. And we get there starting from a scenario that we run into, whether it's through coaching or it's been through our own personal journey. But at some point in our life, we've had people tell us, or we have said ourselves, that I trusted this person too much.
Yeah.
Why did I trust them so much?
And that usually is after being burnt or let down or maybe even betrayed.
I shouldn't have trusted them so much.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden we're kind of unpacking that today, because that's kind of the point of reference of what we're getting at.
Yep.
When we get to that point, why do we get there?
Yep.
What are we really saying in that?
Well, let me back up a little bit as we got that framework on the table. Let me back up a little bit and say that I do think I will often say trust is the fabric of everything. Or we think of trust as a currency.
Sure.
Right? Or you can read books. Covey Jr. wrote a book, Business Moves at the Speed of Trust, which I agree with. I think trust is one of those foundational principles of teamwork and building ecosystems that are able to be highly creative and innovative. And so trust matters. And I think a lot of books, and culture books in particular, have been written over the last 20, 30 years, maybe even longer, as the knowledge worker became the creative worker, became the collaborative worker, as we've entered into this new economy where the nature of work has changed such that trust is even more important than ever. It's also created a world where we have to be more honest about what it is, what it's for, how it works. We have to unpack this is
right.
the complexity of this notion. And I hear people hold it kind of loosely. They throw it around.
Yeah.
And you were talking earlier when we were talking about this about how it's a trigger word for some people.
It is.
You know, it can actually, when you say to somebody, I don't trust you.
I mean, that's a loaded,
that can undo a relationship. And it's like, but how can I live in a world where I can't be honest about that?
Right.
I need to be able to say these, but you've got to, again, come back to what you're saying. What kind of trust are we talking about? And I find people want to be trusted deeply, but don't necessarily want to trust deeply, right?
Yeah.
I need my boss to trust me implicitly, but my people, they're just a bunch of entitled whatevers, right?
Yeah.
So we have this really, I would say it's a difficult relationship with this word trust.
Yeah. And there's a complication to it too, because we all do want and expect to be trusted on a level of trust me to do the right thing. So there's an integrity component, I think, where I would say, hey, trust me, I've got your best interest in mind, and I want you to trust me. And because we have relationship, that should be on the table. And I think what we may do is we may try to push that further into a level of competency to be trusted in areas that maybe we haven't proven ourselves.
Ooh, so the difference between values.
Correct.
And competency.
And that's where that trust word gets sticky, because if I say, well, I don't trust you, then all of a sudden you take it personal and say, well, you don't trust me to do the right thing. No, that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But you're an awesome, brain surgeon.
Right.
And maybe you've been doing this for 10,000 hours, but heart surgery, you've never done that once, and you want me to trust you, even though you're an expert here, you want me to trust you with my heart. It's like, oh, well, the stakes are higher. And it's not that I don't trust you to do the right thing. It's that I don't know that you have the capacity or the competency proven yet. And so there is this tension of how do we have these conversations, because that's what we're really saying is I shouldn't have trusted that person so much. What are we really saying there? And in these books that are written, sometimes I think the expectation is if I'm going to create a culture that empowers, and if I just create the perfect culture, then everything else will work out. It's this euphoric, everything else works out if my people are happy, they're going to do the right thing, and they're going to produce the best results. And yet there's no definition around that, and there's no responsibility or accountability tied to it. I think that's where we can get lost as leaders to go, well, I'm going to create a high value of trust, but not anchor it to any expectation or competency. That's when we end up in these situations down the road going, man, I trusted this person too much. It's not that they're not trustworthy. They weren't ready to carry the thing that actually placed on their burden. It maybe not even be their fault at that point, because we didn't define the situation for them.
Yeah. So what do you do with that dilemma? How would you approach this question of can you trust your team too much?
Yeah, man, it's a complicated conversation. It's like we all have been in those situations where someone who we expected to carry the ball a certain way didn't carry it the way we thought they would, and now we have to have that talk. I think the first thing we have to do as leaders is recognize there are quantifiable metrics that we have to measure in the actual thing that we're entrusting to somebody. There's something we need to measure. There's something that we need to produce. There's a result or an outcome that we're looking for. So a high trust environment, like in my business or in the teams that we try to create, might mean, hey, low control. As much as possible, we're going to lead, and then we're going to manage only when necessary. It's not that management's bad, but management meaning the control mechanisms to force or direct things as much as possible. Well, with that comes then a clearer outcome has to be defined. What is the actual target, which puts the burden on leadership? Because we have to do the work to go, what does success look like, so that this person can actually be trusted to carry that out, maybe even in their own way, autonomous all the way to the edges without breaking the law to produce the result. Well, if we can do that work, then I think that's part of the work we do in creating trust within our teams. But I think sometimes what we have is this relationship with the word trust, because I do too. Like, I'm a high capacity leader in the sense of I like to be autonomous. I've built a few things in my life. I could say I have a little bit of a track record of success and my years of there. But I also put me on the other side, and I'm like, hey, I don't want to be controlled. Don't control me. Don't you trust me? If you trusted me, you wouldn't control me.
Right.
But get clear with the outcome.
Right.
So then I know what you're aiming at, and we can work together and at least producing something that,
I often think about this. First of all, when the way we talk about this is I trust you or I don't trust you, right? So we come to the conversation and it's, I don't trust you. And it's like, well, that feels so
what does
offensive,
that mean?
right?
It does, yeah.
It's like all of me, the whole,
Yeah.
and what you're doing is you're breaking it up into these different categories and stuff. And,
Yeah.
and there are people who I would trust to fix my car, but I wouldn't trust them to watch my kids.
Right. That's a great example.
You know, it's just, no, you're no,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm not doing that. But you can fix my car, or there's people I would trust to be fabulous employees. They've got that thing all figured out. But to be a business partner, it's like that requires something different. I don't know if I trust you with that.
Yeah.
And so there's these different categories of trust. And I think we need to be more clear when we use this language about trust you to, blah, 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 fill in a blank there. I trust you to fix my car. I have trust for you there. But over here, we're managing money. And you're kind of bad at that, and so I'm putting more limits and controls, and you can't have a company credit card and whatever, right? So that's one way that I think we need to do this, is recognize all the different ways that we can trust people. Another one is we talk about trust like it's an on-off switch. My trust for you is on.
Yeah.
Now it's off. Right? You offended me, and so I don't trust you at all. That kind of thing. And it's like, wait, it's more like a dimmer switch. We want to dial it. It gets dialed up and down, because there are people who I trust, I like, I enjoy, I recommend, I refer to them, but it's at a certain level. And then, but if you need something where, man, if we're going to walk into a different depth of relationship, we have to do some work to dial the trust up.
Yeah.
And see if we can, and maybe we actually can't. And so this amount of trust is where we need to stay. And there's levels, there's dimmer switches, a lot. What's the nature of the relationship? How much trust is required? When I was dating my wife, I trusted her as a girlfriend. Now that she's my wife, I have to trust her a lot more, because the stakes are higher.
They are higher. But back to this question, which is what got us into this episode, is we find ourselves in these moments where we have said and we feel, I shouldn't have trusted that person so much. So what are we meaning by that?
So we have to, I think that's the right question. You have to sit down with yourself. You're having an experience of something that usually something went wrong, and you're having an experience. And the first one I think about is where a leader will often think that if I just build enough empowerment, if I believe in people enough, if I trust them, if I give them what they want, they'll what? Well, that needs defining, which is what you're talking about, outcomes. And a lot of times it's not defined very well. And then you find out they didn't do it. And then somehow it's this feeling of having, I trusted them too much. And it's like, well, probably not. That's probably not the right language. We're probably talking about you didn't lead them well. You didn't show them, we're trying to get up that mountain. Here are some resources, and get up the mountain. Right. And so there's a lack of trust, but verify is one of those things. If you trust somebody, it doesn't mean you don't come around and you check in and you measure and you see what's going on, and you offer feedback and you help and support when they're breaking down. And there's all kinds of things you can do with verify besides punish people. It's not a police action. It's a what's going on. Right. And I think what some people do is they want to trust and then just leave people alone.
Right.
And that's an avoidance mechanism.
Well, and it's also depending on the stakes. You may be putting your business or things at risk that you don't really intend to put at risk, because you're entrusting it blindly in a way that feels maybe a little irresponsible.
Yep. So I think sometimes when you say I trusted them too much, that's not really what you did. What you did is you avoided the responsibility that was yours, hoping it would all work out. And then we use this blanket of trust as kind of if I trust everybody, they'll do the right things. But what are the right things?
Right.
Sometimes I think that when we say we trusted someone too much, there's a implicit transaction involved, which kind of is the thing we're saying a minute ago about defining outcomes. I think there are people who hope that if I use encouraging, powering, inspiring language, it creates a transaction where then you almost have to give me what I want.
Right.
I gave you what you want. Now you have to give me what I want. And I don't think that's the right way to think about it.
I don't think the world works that way.
I don't either.
Yeah.
The universe doesn't care,
Yeah.
and they don't either.
That's right.
They're after whatever
They're like,
after.
oh, thank you. I'll take that.
That's great. So I think that gets us into trouble. I think ultimately, at the foundation of this question for me, if I'm going to trust you, if you've demonstrated, and that's a past tense idea, trustworthiness, what that means is that I can actually put more pressure on you.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of emerging leaders that have been, they're getting seasoned. They're figuring this thing out. I think they're beginning to realize, oh, I was hoping that if I empowered, encouraged, inspired, and trusted you, that I could put more weight on you. But in fact, the person didn't do the work.
Yeah.
They didn't become, and so the reverse of this is when I'm being trusted, when someone says, I want to be trusted, I want to be empowered, are they aware that means so I can carry more weight?
Yeah.
Or do they hope it means so the burden gets lighter?
Yeah. And I think within this too, there's a leadership development question that I think the leader needs to understand, because if you're looking to depend on someone instantly, then the vetting process and the qualifications that you're looking for, they're going to come at a higher cost in a sense, because you're looking for more of an instant ability to just hand something off. And sometimes as CEOs, entrepreneurs, we're running so fast, I need to just know I can trust somebody to take this thing and actually take it further than I could. And that's what I really want.
Yeah. And that's right. That's
because I don't have time, I'm handing it off maybe irresponsibly rather than doing the vetting process. Because really, if we're going to build trust, what I'm hearing you saying in that last comment you made is trust is kind of a partnered cooperation, that if I'm really building trust and developing my leaders, then I'm going to give them opportunities to be trusted in increments. So I'm going to add a little bit of pressure. I'm going to sit back and watch. How did they do? I might coach. I might give them feedback. Hey, great job. Now let's do it again. I'm going to give you a little more pressure. But that's a slower process of developing and growing trusted leaders. And I think we have to decide as senior leaders, like, what is my current need? Because sometimes in the quick fix, and I can tell you, I've been that person, and I've also coached people where they don't really want to groom someone or to develop someone to be trusted in their company. They want a quick answer. Well, that's a different type of trust.
Yep.
You
know, that person comes competent,
right,
with evidence that they've done it before.
And they cost more money.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think in this idea of building great companies, building great people you can trust, right? It's the idea of building people who are stronger and more and increasingly capable of carrying the weight of the world as it is.
Right.
To be trusted is to have more responsibility. To have more responsibility is to be able to handle more pressure. And if somebody can't handle pressure and you're putting it on them and then saying, I trust you, you're the fool.
You're the one to blame.
If you're the person saying, I want to be trusted and empowered, encouraged, and inspired, but you don't understand what you really want is to be unstifled. It's like, I don't want to be controlled,
right,
and I want to be unstifled. Okay, so that happens, and now everything gets light and easy. No, that's not the way that works. What happens is you change your position from being controlled and stifled to self-control and still stifled.
Yeah.
But you're stifled by a weight you want to carry and are able to carry. There's an act of service and sacrifice involved instead of punishment. But it doesn't lead to the easy life. It leads to a harder life.
Yeah.
The more you're trusted, the harder it gets. We want it to be hard but worth it, not hard but not worth it, right? That's the difference. And so when I hear people say, well, you're not trusting me, like, you don't trust me, and these arguments form, right? It's like, well, how much weight can you carry?
Yeah.
Are they unwilling to actually put this burden on you? Are you asking for the burden right now?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's what they're asking for sometimes. And I think that's just immaturity speaking, and that's fine.
Yeah.
People are allowed to be immature and to mature over time. But when an immature person is complaining of not being trusted, sometimes what you have to say is, that is correct.
Yeah. And good leadership, I think, is willing to have those hard talks to work through the trigger word of trust to say, here's what I mean.
Yeah. What do you mean when you say it's a trigger word? What do you mean by that?
Well,
what's your experience been?
Because trust can be, I mean, we've just all experienced, but the minute you say, I don't trust you. So for example, like in the EOS system, part of how we assign our people, right? It's do they get it? Do they want it? And do they have capacity for it? So a lot of times we have a person who they get the job in the sense of they get it, they understand it, they want it, they definitely have the passion for it, and maybe they've actually built the relational equity to be trusted. Like they're loyal.
Yeah,
they have your values. They're the right person. I mean, they got all the right things, and so they're asking for a shot, but you haven't proven their capacity yet, and so you give them the ball. They want to play quarterback, and you say, okay, let's give you a chance because you've done all the right things. Let's see if you have it. And then all of a sudden they're fumbling. Like they're awesome at receiver. They are all-star receiver, but they want a shot at quarterback. So sometimes we give them out of trust a level of a shot, but then we realize it's not good for them because they can't be awesome there, and it's not good for the company because ultimately we lose when we play that. So then we have the talk to go, listen, I don't trust you in the role of quarterback. What do you mean?
Right.
You don't trust me? No, I actually do trust you, which is why you got the shot.
Yeah.
But in this role, I don't trust you for these reasons. And we got to be willing to navigate that word or use a different word in it to even say, maybe you don't use trust. Maybe you say, I don't have the confidence in you. I trust you wholeheartedly. You have the right intentions. But in this role, I don't have the confidence that you're able to see what needs to be seen, that you're able to call the plays that need to be played. So I need to move you back over here where you can be awesome.
Yeah.
And I have the confidence to make you a starter. Yeah. You're a starting all-star player here. But here, it's not working.
Right. That's an interesting nuance you just made there about the difference between I trust your intentions, your heart's in the right place, but the results you're producing, I am not confident.
Exactly.
Not only in your ability to do that, in your ability to even learn how to. This isn't a good fit.
Yeah.
Kind of language. Yeah, that's cool. And it feels offensive when you tell me you don't trust me because it feels like it goes to my intention.
It does.
And yeah, that's very different. Trust is, it's one of the things when I'll sit with a leader and we're working through a problem, trying to figure out what do we do? Because these are messy, difficult, hard conversations about people we care about them. We don't hold these lightly. And I'll be dialoguing with them, and they're trying every which way to figure out how to maneuver into a position where we don't have to have hard conversations.
Right.
And sometimes I'll just kind of lean back and say, okay, we've worked this thing through in all these different ways, thought about all these scenarios, but I want you to ask yourself a question. Do you fundamentally trust them to do this work? To hand over this department, this client, this responsibility? Do you trust them?
Yeah.
And you have to just look inside. And if you can get clear, if you're activated and triggered and mad and really pissed off at them at the moment, it's not the right time. No. But in those calm moments when you look in your heart and you just say, I don't. That's actionable information. It doesn't mean you have to fire them or do anything dramatic. It just means you need to know that. Because now you can ask questions like, okay, what do you trust them with? Or what would they need to do to earn that trust? And it might be 3 months of repetitive results in some. It could be doable, but we have to be honest at times. I don't. I don't think they're doing a good job.
Yeah. And
sometimes you have to know that in your own voice because they think they're doing a good job. They might disagree with you on that.
Yeah. And I think you can avoid a lot of trust issues early on if you start by hiring the right people first. meaning right people, that they carry at least the heart and the culture and the values that you carry. Because if you're getting this far down the road with somebody who is highly skilled and they're actually getting results that you like, but they're not doing it in a manner that represents the culture of your company, that's an interesting situation to say, I can't believe I trusted them so much. Because that's a harder one to navigate, because you got someone who's producing, but they're violating the very core of your business ethics. And you're just like, hey, that's not who we are. It's not right or wrong, but this is the way we're going. And I don't trust you to carry the spirit of the company, even though you're putting up the highest sales.
And in that case, you've inverted. I totally have confidence in your ability to sell. I don't trust you to do the right thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And to be honest, though, we've gotten ourselves down that road sometimes because we've seen the shiny resume and we haven't given the process the due diligence to really vet that person and go, do they carry the first things first? Everything else we can work with, but that type of trust, we shouldn't really even hire them if we can kind of root it out before they ever become an employee or on our team.
So actually, back to the question, can you trust your team too much? I actually think the answer, my first answer to that would be no, you can't, because I don't think there's a limit or end to how much you can trust somebody. I have, and the more trust you create, the more, the faster the team moves, the more effective, the more creative, it's just the better it is. Trust to me is a currency, and it is the currency on which the economy actually functions. So no, I don't think you can trust your team too much. However, I think you can deploy trust in unwise ways. I think you can deploy trust too fast. I think you can put too much pressure on somebody that they actually can't lift. And in that case, but I don't like the idea that I've trusted them too much. I think I gave them too much. I trusted them with too much.
Right.
And it's but if we could pull that back and say, here, carry this first, or let's get you in the right position, then you're back to being able to trust them. So I do think there's a failure and a breakdown that can happen. But I don't like the language, I trusted them too much. I don't have a replacement for it, which is weird.
But I think too, if we're wanting to grow and develop, which I think most of us do, right? Where we are today isn't necessarily where we think we're going to be tomorrow. And there is a vision for our life to grow bigger. I think we have to accept the fact that if we're going to be trusted, it's going to come with more responsibility.
That is the key.
Right?
Yep.
And there isn't this free trust that I deserve to be trusted because I'm a human and I have a pulse.
Like, and then I can do whatever I want with it.
And I can do whatever I want with it. And so there is a level of, hey, if we all own that, to go, hey, I'm willing to show up and I do want to grow in my trust, but carry the sense that with that is a responsibility.
Would you say trust always has strings attached?
In this case, I would.
I think so.
Yeah, I think there are conditions to it.
I've never thought of it quite that way, but that's what trust is. It comes with strings attached. In Christian parlance and theology, we talk about unconditional love and conditional love. And strings attached is conditional love. So is there an equivalency, going back to the I love pizza, I love my wife,
right?
Is there a conditional trust and an unconditional trust?
I don't know, man. I think even the lowest form of trust, we've established some, there's some loose string attached to that going, I've seen you at least being a nice person. Or you came as a referral from someone I trust. Right? Even sometimes the people we trust that we don't know, it comes through a connection of someone. It does.
We call them the triangle of trust, and then it transfers. And I think we think about marriage having this notion of it lasts forever. That's the ideal anyway, and that's the hope that many people say in their vows. And it's this unconditional love that cannot be broken. But if trust has an if there is such a thing as unconditional trust, then it couldn't be broken. But we speak of trust as being able to be broken. And in that way, now I'm totally I'm thinking out loud right now. But in that way, I think there's a way in which I might have an unconditional love for you that cannot be broken, but when you break my trust, it's my unconditional love that can repair trust.
Sure.
And so in that way, maybe there is no such thing as unconditional trust. And if that's the case, then trust has strings attached. Mm-hmm. Then what are they? And if we're saying we trust somebody, but we're not able to articulate the strings attached, and it's the passing on of responsibility. And that's that weight, that pressure. And if you want to be trusted, you need to know that it's going to cost you something. It's going to be heavy to carry that. Responsibility is heavy.
Yeah.
Are you strong enough to carry it? And so trustworthiness would have something to do with strength, which again reduces the probability of it breaking. Mm-hmm. Or something like that. I'm fascinated what the audience thinks about that. Is there such a thing as unconditional trust?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thought because like I do think there's a baseline that we have as general humans where we trust people at a certain minimal level. It's not like a 0-0. There is a level of we trust in the basic decency of humanity to say if I'm getting mugged on the street, someone is going to respond to my cry for help. There's a level of I trust as I cry out. But I think trust comes with strings in the sense that trust is built and developed and maintained as we prove. Yeah. And the proving of those strings is faithfulness. Uh-huh. It's being a man of your word. You know, my mom would always say, I don't care what you say. I care about what you do. Uh-huh. You know, your words don't mean anything to me. You know, but not that they don't mean anything, but the fact is your actions are the things that we're measuring. Yeah. You know, that you're showing up and doing. And I think as we do that more in relationships, we demonstrate a capacity for bigger trust. Yeah. Right. But I wonder if we kind of start off in a level of the lowest form of trust. But I don't know. Is there still a string tied to that?
There's a you've just stepped into a classic philosophical argument between Hobbes and Rousseau. And Rousseau would, as I understand it, would suggest that human nature is basically good, and you can then build from there. And of course it goes wrong, and there's corrupting features, and a lot of times we institutionalize the world in a way that causes the corruption. But if you got rid of all that, you'd find that there's this basic goodness to humanity. And then the Hobbesian worldview says, no, it's all broken. Humans are desolate human people that you cannot trust them, which is why we have to build institutions, and the institutionalization of society is what creates the ability for trust. And they really are many ways at odds with each other, and I think what most thinking people would say is it's some of both.
Sure.
I think we want to live in a world where at the foundation of everything is this basic goodness and trustworthiness. But I don't know that. I think that people who live from that conviction end up being betrayed at some point and having to deal with.
Yeah, exactly.
So my favorite quote of this, it's a psychologist that said this, but he said, if you're looking for the line between, and I don't remember who, so that's why I can't tell you who, I'm just going to quote him. But he said, if you're looking for the line between good and evil, and a lot of us are looking for the line between good and evil, but if you want to find it, just look right through the heart of every human. And that's what actually makes the most sense to me. There is a part of me that is loyal and dependable and kind and for you and for me and good. And there's a monster in me as well. And those two things are warring it out at times. And so that's one of those questions we need to keep asking, but I don't know if there's an answer.
Yeah.
And those are the best questions, the unanswerable ones. If there's a way in which if I can find a way to live as though everybody is basically trustworthy, and I'm willing to pay the price of betrayal when that happens, and then cover that with, that's okay. They have their issues, but basically I live in a world where I trust people. What would I actually be trusting them with? Mm-hmm. What is and I don't know that the quantity of thing there is very, there might be a thing there, but I don't think that's what we're talking about when we elevate that in the human experience to the building of a team. Because when we're building a team, there's an objective with a desired result, and there's responsibility, and there's weight and pressure at that level, and we want to win.
Right.
And once you put it into that context of we want to accomplish, win, succeed, whatever the metrics are, whatever the success metric is, you've put it into a space where if you don't perform, it's not going to work.
Yeah, if you don't perform when it's been clearly defined.
Yeah.
Because I do think we bear a bit of responsibility in our leadership to define the results and the outcomes. So then we can hold that person accountable for breaking trust or for our trust not being where it needs to be or where you might want it to be. Yep. But if we haven't done that work as leaders, I think we do set the people we love and lead to fail at points too, because they're trying, but they don't necessarily know what success looks like. And so as a result too, we're blaming them for failing at something that they were doomed to fail from the beginning.
Yeah. Which is why we talk so much here about the what do you want question and the vision and the purpose and the goal setting. It's why those things really matter in building teamwork. If we don't know what game we're playing and how to win, how can we call ourselves a team?
Yeah.
And once we've done the work, then we have to trust each other with it. But then we have to verify and measure and come back. You got to stare at the scoreboard.
Yeah.
It's halftime. We're down by 10 points.
Points matter. They matter.
I heard a coach, I think it was his football coach, say one time, he said, it's halftime, they're losing. And he says, look, guys, you've heard it said, you either win or learn. He says, I'm telling you, there's nothing you can learn from losing that you can't learn from barely winning.
That's right. That's awesome.
And I don't know if that's true, but I liked it.
Yeah.
Well, wrap us up here by telling us, how would you answer this question?
Yeah.
Can you trust your team too much?
I think you're right. I think ideally, no. If we're doing the work and to create the environment where people truly feel empowered and inspired, and they're given the resources and the outcomes of success. And we're also creating as much of an autonomous environment for them to feel empowered in the way that they might feel the most successful at achieving that method and getting to that outcome. Then I would say, no, we like you said, no, we can't trust our people too much.
Just keep building trust.
So the breakdown is usually somewhere within all those factors we're just talking about. It's like, if I feel like I'm getting there, the first place to always start as a humble leader is to look at yourself and go, where did I drop the ball? Was I not clear enough? Did I have an expectation? Did I set them up for failure because I was playing to their potential rather than to their proven leadership? Because potential is a real thing too.
It is.
We see it in people.
You just can't pay for it.
They're just not ready yet. And yet we put them in the game to win, and we lost as a result. So sometimes that's our responsibility to carry that. And I think too, when we do that, we actually build trust in the people we're leading when we can sit down and say, hey, listen, we failed here. It's not a you failed. We failed. And here's why. And you carry part of that responsibility to say, if we do this again, here's what we're going to learn. I'm going to get more clear on the outcomes. You're going to get more clear on what's expected of you. And we're going to try again.